I'm Joel.
And I'm Alex.
Welcome to the
Commander's Journey.
The place where we discuss our favorite format of Magic, Commander, from the perspective of a new player.
And an experienced one.
This journey is for new Magic players interested in Commander. And today we are bringing to you another under 100 budget deck tech. This one's actually quite a bit under 100. You got this deck right about $70 without lands. Pretty
yes, good. So I could have actually added, we had some quick, easy upgrades. I could have probably added them all in and still been under 100. Actually, what happened was I was building this deck for another buddy of mine. He's a big Godzilla fan. I was really having trouble finding a Godzilla deck I liked online. So I just said, you know what, let's just do one for the episode. I got to make it a little bit more budgety. Even I don't have the extra 100 to spend. I have to go a little less expensive. So right, this deck is dancing, I think, around the 70 range, a little less than that. So this is a little bit on the cheaper end, but I've got a good amount of play test out of it. And it's holding its own. In fact, it gets very scary very quickly, and just like Godzilla.
There you go, man. Well, just classic red, green, really. And there's some solid cards in here. So let's talk about some of these cards. So let's talk about our commander first, right? So who do we got here? Godzilla, King of the Monsters, huh?
That's an exciting one. And I'm going to say, too, for Magic, the actual name that they use and you have to kind of look at yes. is... It's I can't even pronounce that his first name. Wait, what is it, Joel?
Hold on, I gotta make my screen bigger. Hold on, I gotta zoom into this.
Having a zoom issue.
Zatortha? I couldn't
even pronounce.
It's blurry. Zatortha, Strength Incarnate.
Exactly, but we're gonna just refer to as Godzilla, King of the Monsters. It's the red-green version, and let me read the card text. It's 3 red and a green for a legendary creature, Dinosaur. It has trample, and it says lethal damage dealt to creatures you control is determined by their power rather than their toughness. It's a 7/3.
Okay. So we talked about it for a minute right before So explain this to me. So I'm reading this, and I'm looking at a Dinosaur with trample. He's a 7/3, and I'm thinking he's kind of weak, but because it says lethal damage dealt to creatures you control is determined by power rather than the toughness, you were saying it's sort of like he's a 7/7 when he's in combat, or...
Exactly. He's essentially a 7/7, because any type of damage looks at his power instead of his toughness to decide if it's dead or not, is what it's saying. So minus effects still affect it as if it had 3 toughness. But if you were like trading blows with, let's say, a 4/4 and you're a 7/7, you're 7/3 in this case, but it really is a 7/7. You're going to trample over for that 3, and you're not going to die, even though it had more power than your toughness, because really, it's looking at the power to decide whether or not you die, and not your toughness. If that makes sense.
It does, and I like the example you gave me right before, talking about Chandra's Ignition, which is 3 red and red. It's a sorcery. It says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. So if you were to utilize this on a creature, say...
A creature with 6 power, let's say, yes. And then it did 6 damage to every other creature in play, Godzilla would not die because it's damage. It's not, Yeah,
and it not just Godzilla, but all the creatures that you control at the time. It would be lethal damage dealt to creatures you control is determined by the power. Cool.
Exactly. So basically, we're looking at the power less than the toughness. Think of the toughness as an afterthought if you don't have your commander off, and definitely this deck skews to higher power and lower toughnesses. And with that being said, I did almost build a version of this deck that was super weird. It was all these high power, low toughness creatures with ridiculous mana rates to compensate. But as I was diving deeper and deeper into that deck, I was realizing how difficult it is to pilot. How difficult is it to play? So I said, it's not really fair for a new player to have to learn that way. I was going to have trouble if I were to play that deck. I can't imagine a newer player being able to do it. So this one's a little more, has just a little bit of that, but it's not so into that. This is more of a standard budget, good stuff Godzilla deck that leans into its ability, but isn't, so wrapped up in it that you have to play a really odd way.
Very good, very good. So let's get right into some of the notable cards in this deck. So I'll go ahead and read the first one, and then if you want to kind of go over what these cards, how these cards synergize really well with our commander and this deck. So this is Pydo Titan?
Fido Titan.
It's Fido Titan. I got it on the third try. It's Fido Titan, 4 green and green for a creature plant elemental. When Fido Titan dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control at the beginning of his or her next upkeep, and it is a 7/2.
This is a perfect example of this card going well with the deck. You know, so when a Godzilla's out, this is essentially a 7/7, right? You don't have to worry about the low toughness. You pretty much, it's good to go. And then you also have that savior clause where when it dies, you get to bring it back after a little bit. That way it's never really truly dead unless they exile it. You can just keep on bringing it back over and over and over again. And the downside usually is that's really easy to do because it's low toughness. You don't even have to worry about it as long as you have Godzilla out.
That's really good. And it's on budget. It's on budget.
It's again one of those budget ones, and this one too, it's not a bad card in general. It's just it works perfectly with it. Another one is one I gushed over a little bit, and it's really fantastic in the deck. And I gushed over in our top 5 Ikoria cards. Was my sleeper. It's Quartzwood Crasher. It is 2 red green for a creature dinosaur beast with trample. It says whenever one or more creatures you control with trample damage, or deal combat damage, to a player, create an XX green dinosaur beast creature token. Oh, that was a mouthful. With trample, where X is the amount of damage done to creatures dealt to that player. It's a 6/6. Go, boy! I kind of butchered that one trying to even just get it out of my mouth. But essentially, you'll
the same
make
way
a token.
Quartzwood Crasher will butcher you when he's on the battlefield.
You're not wrong about that. But essentially with Quartzwood Crasher, you know, our commander has trample, so he's already playing into this. Basically, you're going to make a token equal to the amount of trample damage you did that turn, whether that be damage over or just damage in general with a creature with trample. And you'll make an XX token with trample that is also that. So this can kind of snowball out of control. Where I had a game once where I got Godzilla out a little early. I got a Quartzwood Crasher next turn, swung in with Godzilla by itself, and an open player. I believe first, maybe they blocked it with a chumper for 1 or something. I made like a 6/6, and then I was able to swing with Godzilla, that 6/6, and Quartzwood Crasher, and pretty much unopposed. And I believe I had a 18/18 or something like that. And this is like turn 5 or 6. And at 18/18 trampler, it's just I basically won that game before anyone got going.
Removal.
Removal is the answer to that. But again, you know, if you get going out of the gate fast enough, and it's much easier to do in a green deck, you can kind of go at the races. And that is both the upside and the downside to this deck. You're going to make big things. They're going to do a lot of damage. You're going to sneak in there and do a lot of surprise damage. But that'll also make you a target too.
Yep, and it will cost a lot. But but you can do that in green, so that's the good value of it.
Exactly.
And another card here is Sylvos, Rogue Elemental for 3 green. It's a legendary creature elemental with trample, and for 1 green, you can regenerate Sylvos, Rogue Elemental, and it's 8/5. That's nice because it's a regenerating 8/5, and with Godzilla, it's a regenerating 8/8.
Exactly.
With trample.
And it really works with that the commander, and again, it protects itself. It has good stats. It's not hard to get out early because you have green in there. You basically just go for the races with this deck, and you just keep on going at it. And really, the trick is to find the ideal time to go in there and just kind of turn on the whether it be turn on, how do I want to say it? Turn on the sprinklers. That's not the term, but really just start pedal to the metal. How about that? Pedal to the metal.
Pedal to the metal. It's better than turn on the sprinklers.
That's pretty embarrassing. Pedal to the metal. You just go all in with what you got, and it's really finding the right moment. Sometimes it's you want to do it out of the gate before anyone gets going, and sometimes you want to hold back a little bit, play a little under the radar, and then go for broke. And my next card here we're going to talk about really helps with that. This card is Malignus. It's 3 red and a red for a creature elemental spirit. Malignus' power and toughness are each equal to the number or the highest life total among your opponents rounded up. which in Commander can make it a 20/20.
Jeez. That's
opening
insane.
move. So it's a 20/20. And also, damage that would be dealt by Malignus can't be prevented. So you have a 20/20. They have no way to prevent the damage. It's going to hit. And there's a lot of things in this deck also that grant trample. And it's very easy to give trample to other things. So all of a sudden, you might easily have a 20/20 trampler out of nowhere, swinging in big. There's even a couple things that do double strike or just surprise damage. This deck, I think, more than almost any other deck I've ever built, can, by just all of a sudden one big swing, come out of the gate and just knock an opponent right out.
And well, that's very on flavor because it's Godzilla, you know.
It is very Godzilla.
Very much on flavor. And then, of course, you got to have a Rhythm of the Wild if you're playing in red-green, right?
And this is the secret all-star to the deck. Rhythm of the Wild is such a great card for Gruul. It really, really helps out the deck. Rhythm of the Wild is 1 red and a green for an enchantment. Creature spells you control can't be countered. Already like it. And then it says non-token creatures you control have Riot, which is you may enter the battlefield with your choice of a +1/+1 counter or haste. You know, most of the time you're going to be picking haste, but there are definitely situations with the +1/+1 counter is preferred, especially if you're not going to get to swing with anything early. But it protects your creatures, which is fantastic, and you get to give everything haste. That's just an ideal card for the deck.
It's exactly what you want going on with this many creatures swinging in at people's faces. So those are some really good cards. Let's go into ramp now. Let's talk about some of the best synergistic ramp cards for this deck.
And this card also goes fantastic with the deck. That is Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsizma. It's 3 and a green for legendary creature Bear. Creature spells you cast with 4 power or greater cost 2 less to cast, which again goes fantastic with our Godzilla looking at power strategy. And it also says whenever Goreclaw attacks, each creature you control with power 4 or greater gets +1/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. It's a 4/3. So, you know, I already said that a lot of things give trample in the deck. This is another great example. High power, easy trampler, cost less, all the things we want to hear for the deck.
Definitely a card you don't want to see somebody get out early because then they get those big monsters out earlier just because it costs 2 less, and that's not fun for the other person. That's exactly what they're trying to do.
Exactly. So our other card we have is Beanstalk Giant. It's 6 and a green for a creature giant. It says Beanstalk's power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control, which is great for the deck too. But really what's nice about it is it has Fertile Footsteps as its adventure. It's 2 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, and shuffle your library. So it's not the greatest rate, but you get early game a nice ramp spell, later game a big creature, often will come in with a lot of power and toughness based on how hard you ramped. Really helps into that strategy.
It's great for these big creature decks because you need the ramp early on, and then, like you said, you got a big creature to play with. Very good.
So on to the next big ramp spell we have that really work with it, and this is another interesting creature. Joel, do you want to take this one? This card is Realm Seekers.
You know, and I think I just put this in my other deck. I just found this card too. So Realm Seekers is 4 green and a green for a creature elf scout. Realm Seekers enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the total number of cards in all players' hands. And then for 2 and a green, you can remove a +1/+1 counter from Realm Seekers, search your library for a land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. And he comes out as a 0/0 because of all those counters you get on him. But that's really good because if there's a lot of other cards in people's hands in a game of Commander. So you're going to get a lot of +1/+1 counters to mess with.
It's extremely powerful. Again, it helps out that ramp, even though it doesn't go into the battlefield, it goes into your hand. It can help smooth out your draws, help really even out the deck in general. And again, will come in often as very big creature for only 6.
That's it. That's all you got to pay is 6.
So next we'll move on to Synergistic. card draw spells, and most of these synergistic, there's actually almost all the card draw spells in synergistic. I kind of picked some interesting ones out versus all of them, because almost all of them, there's a few that are just go-to creature based draw and green. But there's quite a number of ones, of course, that care about that power when it comes into play. Instead of just listing them all, I just named a few that are a little more interesting. One of them is Soul's Majesty. It's part of the Soul Cycle. It's 4 and a green for a sorcery. It says draw cards equal to the power of target creature you control. So often you'll aim at Godzilla or whatever other big thing you have, and you'll draw that many cards.
That's a really good rate in this deck, because for 4, so you're paying 5 mana, but you could potentially draw in 7 cards on a consistent basis with this. Soul's Majesty.
Very good. And another good card draw card is a very similar effect is Hunter's Insight. It's also 2 and a green for an instant that says choose target creature you control. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker this turn, draw that many cards. So this is similar. You have to swing in for that one, which makes it a little weaker. But and actually, I apologize. It's actually 2 less mana, so it's slightly less mana. You have to swing in with it, though, so it's a bit of give and take, but you can know exactly what you're getting there. And again, you'll often be hitting for big stuff, so not too bad at all.
Not bad at all. Another really good card for card draw is Return of the Wild Speaker. For 4 and a green, it's instant. It says choose one, draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. Godzilla again. Or you can use this other effect, which is non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 to end of turn. So you can use this as a card draw spell, but you can also use this as to knock somebody out, or as a win con potentially, by pumping everything up by +3/+3.
Exactly. You can add it for a little bit of extra variety in there. Definitely adds to that win con. Next, we'll move on to best synergistic single target removal spells. One of the ones is the other part of the Soul Cycle that I have both parts of them here that are in my colors for the Godzilla deck. And this other one is Soul's Fire. It's 2 and a red for an instant. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to any target. So all of a sudden I can basically remove anything I want as long as I have a big creature. Or, we talked about that situation with Quartzwood Crasher, or even with, a Malignus, where all of a sudden it gets huge out of nowhere. I can jump at 3 extra mana and guarantee kill a player turn 5 or 6, depending on how your mana is doing. Just out of nowhere, where all of a sudden you swing in for 20, and then you can just deal the other 20 to him. All of a sudden, this is one of those cards that can really just take out a win, or is again a removal spell when you need it.
That is nasty. It truly is. And I love seeing using removal spells in this way, especially when you're in Gruul colors, right, where you don't have all. Yeah,
there's definitely a lot of fight effects too in the deck. I didn't list those as much, but there's a lot of fights going on because, of course, you deal damage to each other. Godzilla will protect them, and at that point too, you're generally going to win most of those fights.
There you go. Another really good single target removal spell is Sarkhan's Unsealing. It's 3 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a creature spell with power 4, 5, or 6, Sarkhan's Unsealing deals 4 damage to any target. Whenever you cast a creature spell with power 7 or greater, Sarkhan's Unsealing deals 4 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. So, I mean, if you play this and then you cast your commander, it's almost like a board wipe.
Exactly. It's right in the fine line. I put in the single target removal categories. That's where you're going to hit most of the time. But really in this deck, too, you're just as often going to hit that board wipe side of things, where all of a sudden, you can really just lay into an opponent or just wipe their whole board. It really, in this card, I completely went over my head in M19. I don't even remember it. But when I was looking up for the stuff for the deck, I thought this fit perfectly in there.
Yeah, I think it fits really well, like you said, because you have all those different large-sized creatures, so it makes this card very relevant.
Next, we'll move on to the most synergistic board wipe. This deck in general, too, it definitely doesn't have as many board wipes, trying to keep within budget, but again, feel free to throw a Blasphemous Act or anything in there. That's not too bad. and I probably could have thrown it in and kept under 100 budget. But because I was trying to keep this deck a little on the cheaper end, and I happen to have an extra one of these, I thought it would be perfect for the deck. It really does flavor with it well. And we talked about it already, which is Chandra's Ignition. It's 3 red and a red for a sorcery. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. So often, too, what's nice about this is it's kind of a one-sided board wipe as well, where you will take your other creatures out, but you'll get to generally keep your most powerful thing and then wipe everything else out.
There you go. There you go. So let's talk now about some recursion and protection. What is your best synergistic recursion protection spell in this deck?
So this deck doesn't have too much synergistic recursion. It has a few recursion stuff. None of it's too synergistic, so I'd rather talk about the protection side of things. One thing I want to point out too is there's a lot of interesting protection stuff, such as Rhythm of the Wild. You know, you can't be countered. That's a form of protection.
Yes.
This deck actually does a lot of interesting stuff by when you pump a creature's power. It also pumps their toughness as long as Godzilla's out. So in some ways, you know, you could look at it as combat tricks, or in this case, one of the cards I want to talk about in the deck, Kessig Wolf Run, which is a land and taps for a colorless, but for X red and a green and tap, target creature gets +X/+0 and trample until end of turn. So all of a sudden you can kind of turn this as a way to protect your creatures. So if all of a sudden, you know, they're swinging in on you or you're swinging in, they surprise you with something, you can pump up to some ridiculous numbers to then protect the creature by just pumping up the power and then getting all that toughness with it.
Very nice. Very nice.
And there's another card in here that I wanted to talk about for protection, and this is one of the go-tos for a creature-based strategy in green, and it works great here too because we're ramping hard. It also has good numbers, which is what the deck wants, and that card is Archetype of Endurance. It's 6 green to green for an enchantment creature boar. Creatures you control have hexproof, and then on top of it, creatures your opponents control lose hexproof and cannot gain hexproof. And it's a 6/5, so already leaning towards the power, but that's not really it. It's just a way for we can protect our guys on a budget.
Very flavorful and very nasty, yeah. Especially that you're causing other people to not be able to have hexproof. Allows you to get in there with your Chaos Warp or something of that nature.
I got a lot of fight spells in this deck, so hexproof is something we want to keep an eye on. Our opponents having it makes it a lot harder. So that's a lot of the big notable cards out of the deck. Really the win condition is you're going to do a lot of damage. It's going to be much more mana efficient in that you're focusing more on the power, not the toughness. So where you get crazy big stats is often for cheaper mana. And again, you can kind of come out of nowhere and really take a player out for good or for bad. It really feels Godzilla-ish though, doesn't it?
It does. You just got to get in there and swing out and kill things and just stomp on them and use your fire and burn them out.
And one of the other things I want to talk about too, this is more of a flavorful thing that I thought was just too cool to pass up. So normally I would by choice throw a Blasphemous Act in the deck. It's a fantastic card, but I thought for this deck specifically, just to keep it a little more flavorful, I put a Subterranean Tremors in there as well, or instead of, which is definitely a different card, but it also fits that board wipe category, and I want to talk about it real quick. It's X in a red for a sorcery. Subterranean Tremors deals X damage to each creature without flying. If X is 4 or more, destroy all artifacts as well. And if X is 8 or more, put an 8/8 red lizard creature token onto the battlefield. So you can see here why, Joel, I thought this would be a good pick.
Yeah,
for this
because
deck.
you got that lizard just coming out of the ground. It's like Godzilla's babies. It's like that one Godzilla movie that wasn't as good as the other Godzilla movies, where there was a bunch of Godzilla babies underneath. You remember that one?
No, I don't.
15 years,
But
10 years ago? I don't remember when that came out.
It just felt a little too flavorful to pass up on, you know. If you want to make this deck a little more competitive, maybe swap it out for a Blasphemous Act, or even better, maybe swap something else out and keep them both in the deck. But I just thought it was too flavorful a card to pass up.
I mean, there's always good flavor in here. I mean, you got Grow from the Ashes, Decimate, all this, anything having to do with fire. Even your Swiftfoot boots, the boots are on fire. Like,
there's a number of things. And again, it was just one of those, I saw the opportunity and I took it. So the things I like talking about in these, which are some of the weaknesses the deck has, we talked about one of them already. It's a little susceptible for your opponents to have hexproof. Now it does have some board wipes, but often the red board wipes, they care about damage being dealt. If you can't quite deal enough damage, it doesn't always protect you. So definitely not having your opponents have hexproof is a nice thing to have, which is why Archetype Endurance is even a little better. Not only does it give your stuff hexproof, but taking away their hexproof really matters for the deck.
Yeah. For sure.
The other thing that happens a decent amount, especially the last deck actually we built had the same problem, but this is more of a chance thing. I doesn't have too many flyers in the deck. Once we get into big green creatures, which the deck wants to do, we started falling back on the flyers. It doesn't have like it has none. I believe it has one or two, or actually two or three in there, but it's not crazy in the flying category. And actually it has more like 3 or 4, so it's a little better.
And you
than
got
I
fight
thought,
spells too, so I think you have some ways to deal with flyers.
It's a little susceptible, but again, it's one of those things. It's not terrible compared to a lot of other green decks. It's actually not too bad at all.
For sure. And so
that's pretty much it.
Yep, and some easy ways to upgrade this deck, in case you wanted to spend a few more dollars than $68 and something.
Absolutely. If you want to just spend the full 100, we talked about again. Normally I would have just thrown it in, but I was trying to be a little cheaper this time around. Sadly, just because I don't have the finances currently on me. But throw in a Rishkar's Expertise. It's a fantastic card, which is that card draw for power, but then also as well will let you play something for free. So just a slight upgrade to some of these other cards. And the other go-to card I'd like to add here is Asceticism. It did get reprinted recently, so it's not too bad. It's not completely out there, but the deck definitely does well with not being targeted on its end. And plus the regenerate's actually fantastic for it.
It's excellent. Put an Asceticism in every green deck you got.
Pretty much green creature based deck, which is most of them, you're good to go. Actually, there's one other thing too I want to talk about before we move on. Another weakness to the deck is, we already kind of discussed it, is because you kind of come out of nowhere with this deck, and it gets very powerful without your opponents necessarily knowing or realizing how scary you've become. You do have a problem where you can pretty much take a player out, but then everyone's going to kind of look at you. So it's a typical aggro or infect problem, where all of a sudden you do something a little too crazy, everyone gets a little more worried and starts going, well, what do I do? And that's another way you can improve the deck as well, as adding some infect to it.
Well, always adding an infect, and that's sort of on flavor with Godzilla. I don't know, I like the fire more because of the big old dragon dinosaur. He's a dinosaur. You're going to put him in your dino deck. That's what's going to happen.
I actually am. I am going to actually put him in my dino deck. I'm going to make this deck, and I'm also going to have a dino deck, assuming I can get an extra one.
You better tune that thing up soon, because if you keep talking about it, you're going to have to share that deck on here.
I'm eventually, once we tune it up, I'll share my dino deck. We do keep on talking about it. It's not crazy amazing, but it's surprisingly good for what it is.
It's a good deck. Don't listen to him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. There you go. There you go. So there it is. Godzilla, King of the Monsters, or Zilfrath. Whatever his other name is. It's too tiny on my screen to even read. A legendary creature dinosaur. Deck tech under 100. This one without the basic lands is only $68 something TCG prices. So check it out. We'll put a link down below.
It might even go down in price too, because this is before we're talking about this before we're recording this before Commander 2020 comes out. So I think some of the go-to Commander staples that are in the deck will go down in price slightly. So who knows? Catch it at the right time, might be down in price. Catch it too late, and it might be a little up.
Exactly, and this is also good for newer players. It's not a very difficult deck to pilot, like you said. It's a lot of just swing at people's faces, and swing with Godzilla.
So if you have any buddies that are wanting to get interested in Magic, just like I was who likes Godzilla, it's a great way to do it. Or all of a sudden, you can throw them in the deck, get them together, and basically stomp face. They really feel like Godzilla doing it, and hopefully you can make a lifelong Magic player by doing it.
There you go. And so be sure to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, a share, and check out the deck down below. We'll put the Archideck link in there, as well as a way to buy it on TCG Player. Also, we'll leave our general affiliate link there. So if you're buying anything on TCG, buying individual Magic cards or anything, just utilize that. That will help us out so we can keep making these shows. We really appreciate it. And Yeah, there you go. Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
See you guys next time.